March 30th, 1907, page 253. Our trips to Riverdale have opened up a disturbing realm of inquiry for us and have added another dimension to Mary's case. Mr. Soper and I took a train and a carriage up to the Bronx to investigate. We discovered records of typhoid fever in this part of Riverdale dating back as far as November of last year. Altogether, the count was 96 people ill, 13 dead, and the news of more victims coming in every day. A horrifyingly large number of people. We went to the hospital to visit the latest causes, hoping to get the freshest information possible. We visited 7 patients. One girl of 8 years kept running to the toilet. Another child could barely sit up for the pain in her head. We spoke to both of their mothers and obtained useful information from them. Then we moved on to the poor fellow who was raving something about his neighbor's wife, but he was too deep into dementia and too close to death to interview. 4 women had the same rose-shaped rashes that appear on Amy Thompson, but they were able to talk and answered our questions about what they ate and where they shopped and who they had encountered in the past month, and their mother's interviews was enough to give us our answer. All of the victims had bought their milk, butter, and cream at Kinley's farm. We wasted no time going over there and took several samples to be tested. All of the milk was clean, as was the cream, but a batch of butter turned out to be positive for the typhoid. We returned to the farm, bringing with us Dr. Baker and Jonathan so we could test the farmer and several of the farm hands on the spot. The doctor convinced them that the quotidian nature of the test and drew blood from each person, and the boy performed the vital blood serum test on the samples. All of them came out negative except Mr. Kinley's. The man is rife with typhoid germs. Immune. Imagine our surprise to find a second healthy carrier, and so quickly. Though Mr. Kinley doesn't do the milking on a regular basis, he occasionally pitches in. But he is the only one who forms the butter into slabs, and he does this with his bare hands. This is how he transmits the fever. Mr. Kinley had heard about Mary Mallon, who he referred to as Typhoid Mary, which unfortunately I hear very often now. He laughed about the filthy Irish until he understood the results of his own vital test. Mr. Soper pointed out the epidemic in Riverdale, and Mr. Kinley denied that he was to blame for it. His fury made me fear that things would turn ugly. Dr. Baker firmly reminded him of the police intervention in Miss Mallon's case, and the farmer reluctantly agreed to accompany us to the detention hospital where he remains in quarantine, which is another one of your vocabulary words. This is a very disquieting discovery. I don't think anyone had truly envisioned another healthy carrier would exist except Mr. Soper, who seemed to know it all along. There had been a great outcry that Mr. Kinley was not simply tested and released, but is now being held in detention. There have been many letters to the papers, and his wife is very upset. The reporters scream that soon we will have every other healthy New Yorker in quarantine, and for no good reason. The members of the press has bothered to travel to the Memorial Hospital in Riverdale to visit those children and the men and women who burn with fever and clutch at their bellies in pain into the Salmonella typhi bacteria that Mr. Kinley unknowingly passed to them. If they did, they would see the truth. They would see the reason we keep him from the public. They wouldn't defend the germ over the man. I'm beginning to see that it takes a certain endurance to make unpopular decisions, and I suppose this is one of the more difficult challenges a doctor has to face. I don't yet know what the department plans to do with Mr. Kinley. Perhaps it depends on the judge's decision in Mary's case. We don't know if any other healthy carriers exist, nor what causes them, nor what to do about them. There is simply no precedent for any of this. Mr. Soper seems to be including Jonathan in every aspect of our case now. The young man's involvement pains me. He is to appear in Mary's hearing, along with several scientists from the department. Out of all the science fellows, why him? Perhaps I am to have compassion for Jonathan. I overheard him and Dr. Baker speaking on the train. He grew up in St. Francis Orphanage after his parents died. He was too young to know them, and he has no brothers or sisters. All of this seemed to bring out the deepest pity in Dr. Baker. He has survived many difficulties, a life of crime and vice on the streets, and overcame them. He comes from another world, but it's one that seems too far from my own to understand.